Now, Russia renewed its bombing campaign in Syria just hours after Vladimir Putin discussed the conflict with Donald Trump. During his election campaign, the incoming US president repeatedly promised to smash the Islamic State jihadist group, while questioning the Obama administration's policy of also backing Syrian rebels. In his first television interview since Mr. Trump's election victory, the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, said that Mr. Trump could be a natural ally if he follows through on his promise to fight terrorism.
For us, it's still dubious whether he can do or live up to his promises or not. That's why we are very cautious in judging him, especially as he wasn't in a political position before. So we cannot tell anything about what he's going to do. But if, let's say if he's going to fight the terrorists, of course we're going to be ally, natural ally in that regard, with the Russians, with the Iranians, with many other countries who wanted to defeat the terrorists.
So you will cooperate with the Americans in the fight against the...
Of course, definitely. If they are genuine, they have the will, and if they have the ability, of course, we are the first one to fight the terrorists, because we suffered more than any other one in this world from terrorists.
Bashar al-Assad there. Well, we're joined now by the foreign affairs analyst Tim Marshall. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Tim, a fierce aerial assault on eastern Aleppo has resumed. It follows this conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Is that a coincidence?
No, but I think it would have happened anyway, because he's got an 8-week window, Mr. Putin, now, in which America is in between presidents, and so I think he would have done it anyway. He positioned all the vessels down there off the coast of Syria. He's got the submarines up in the Black Sea. He's got the aircraft already there. So it was going to happen anyway. I think he probably wanted to test the waters with Mr. Putin, but this was going to happen anyway. He didn't put all those assets into place, but I think the timing is he wanted to get the election over and then hit.
Right. I think we can show some pictures of government forces, Syrian government forces, bombing eastern Aleppo, because the Russian spokesman has actually denied that Russian planes have been directly involved in eastern Aleppo, only hitting Idlib. That's not the case, is it?
Well, they've been saying this for a year now, and they are hitting left, right and centre. They are mostly hitting opposition forces, including ones funded and trained by the Americans, and what they're not doing very much of is hitting ISIS.
Right. I mean, there's going to be no peace process, it looks at the moment, is there?
There's no reason to think that it's any closer now than it has been at any point in the last year. Forgive the cliche, but the ducks are not in a row. The Saudis have not got what they want, the Turks have not got what they want, the Kurds have not yet been persuaded that they're not going to have a state, etc., etc., etc. There is still some way to go, I'm afraid.
I mean, Gavin, last month Boris Johnson was talking about kinetic action. No one knew exactly what it meant, but some people thought it could mean some sort of military action to prevent Syrian and Russian bombing, or the resuming of bombing. It now looks as if the British and Americans are just going to allow Putin a free hand. Is that how you see it?
Well, no, we certainly shouldn't just allow Putin a free hand. These are shocking images that I think will appall everybody watching this programme, and Russia needs to think about its standing among international nations if it's going to continue.
And how do you make Russia do that?
Well, clearly the first step in that is through diplomatic contacts. We shouldn't give up on those channels. I know...
it hasn't worked, though, has it?
Of course it has. I mean, it's clear from those pictures it hasn't worked thus far, but we shouldn't give up on that. As you say, we are in this period between the new administration coming into play, but we need to continue to work collectively, as many nations as possible, to put pressure on Russia to think about the consequences of its actions.
But if Donald Trump is going to take a softer line, you could say, towards Vladimir Putin, then what on earth is going to make the Russians think again? I think we have more pictures of Russian aircraft carrier, as you said, which had gone through actually European waters so that the planes could take off.
Channel, yeah.
Well, and the Spanish got into a certain amount of trouble for allowing them through. I mean, Boris Johnson said we cannot see Aleppo pulverised in this way, and yet there's no action by the British government to stop it.
So it is something that we have to do with our partners and our allies. We need to talk to them, talk to other nations
with America.
With America, and we'll have to see what the policies of the emerging Trump administration are going to be.
Right. I mean, what do you think the emerging policy is going to be from Donald Trump? We know that he has a relationship with Vladimir Putin. He's already said he's not that keen on NATO, and talked about perhaps some sort of demilitarisation, which of course Vladimir Putin would love. So what hope is there if you are the Syrian rebels, for example?
I think Mr. Trump believes that there are such things as spheres of influence. Now, the previous administration says there's no such thing. Now, there obviously are for the Americans, because Latin America they regard as their sphere of influence. Nobody messes around there without their say-so. But they never admit that such a thing exists. I think Mr. Trump hints that he admits that there are spheres of influence, and I don't think he cares about Syria. And I think that if Mr. Putin wants to help Assad win and crush the opposition, most of which are not moderate anyway, and then turn on ISIS, he's happy with that. As for his policy of putting 30,000 troops into Syria, I think once the Pentagon explains to him what the body count would be of the Americans, that will go away. So I don't think that's going to happen, but I think he recognises spheres of influence, and the bigger danger is actually if he recognises a sphere of influence for what Russia calls its near abroad, which is the Baltic states and other areas.
Right, so what do you make of Jeremy Corbyn's line towards Vladimir Putin and Russia? He agrees with Donald Trump, doesn't he, that actually there should be some sort of demilitarisation between the border between the Baltic states and Russia, and that actually we shouldn't necessarily need to help our NATO allies militarily. Is that the right line to take?
Well, I'm a big supporter of the NATO alliance. I think that it's really important that the message that comes out of Washington, and particularly after some of the rhetoric from the presidential election, is that Europe's security is paramount, and it's not in Europe's interest or in Britain's interest for there to be an isolationist America. And I would hope that some of the rhetoric that was talked up during the presidential election will change as the administration finds.
And what about Jeremy Corbyn's rhetoric when he told Andrew Marr at the weekend, I do think there has to be a process that we try and demilitarise the border between what are now the NATO states and Russia. Is that also a sort of isolationist rhetoric?
Well, I don't think it is isolationist to say that actually we would like both sides to move back from the brink of conflict. Of course, you have an alliance...
That's a lifelong Soviet aim.
Well,
that was the aim of the Soviet Union, was to demilitarise its western border.
But of course, the ultimate point is that we have the fallback of NATO as a Western alliance.
So do you still hold with the line that an attack on one NATO member country means the others come in to defend it?
Well, of course, that is...
Militarily.
That's in the NATO treaty.
But Jeremy Corbyn doesn't seem to completely believe in that. We shouldn't necessarily help our NATO allies in Eastern Europe on a military basis.
Well, I'm not sure that's what he said, to be fair.
I'm not particularly taking sides, but if Mr. Corbyn was to go to Tallinn in Estonia or Lithuania, which has introduced conscription again, and go to Poland, I mean, it's a perfectly respectable position to hold, to say you want this divide, this buffer zone, which is what the Soviets and the Russians have wanted for forever. But the Baltic states, Poland, Romania and others would be incredulous, saying, are you absolutely crazy? What we want is more help because we're scared stiff that you're going to abandon us. And Mr. Trump did say NATO was obsolete. I doubt he'll say that again. That was, as you say, rhetoric. But we are in this period where Mr. Putin is looking for a green light or a red light. At the moment he's had green lights, and forgive me, I think talk of buffer zones and pulling back is another green light, because all they want to do is come forward.
Well, if you have a buffer zone, the NATO troops are hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
From Estonia.
From there.
Yeah.
If you have a buffer zone, the Russian troops are just round the corner.
Yeah. But I think in the light of the decision that we took on the 23rd of June, it's really important that we are seen to be standing by our wider obligations to our friends and allies in Eastern Europe.
All right, we'll leave it there. Tim Marshall, thank you.
Thank you.